So I missed last week. Sorry about that. Been doing some travel for work, and it all just ran together. And I was in airports and didn't have a chance to record. Anyway, so I'm back this week. I was gonna finish it last week. We'll do it. We'll round it out this week. So 2 videos tonight, because that's kind of been my thing lately. But we're gonna do a recap of what we've talked about so far. Still doing the slavery thing, and then I'm gonna do last little uh, my last little point. Then we'll leave you with a challenge and see if anybody rises to it. I'm actually going to leave you with a challenge at the end of this video, do my last video, and then we'll see if anybody comes back with it, and maybe we'll have a little something to talk about next week. And if nobody responds, then we won't go back to it, and you'll just all have to wonder what it was I was talking about. Anyway, so far we have talked about slavery in Scripture, and kind of how it looks like God feels about it. So to recap, we really see 3 different types of slavery show up in Scripture, and that is kind of the women and children being carried off after 2 people groups go to battle, and that generally happened because most of the men were decimated and gone. And after that happened, well, back in the old world, women and children were not really seen as citizens. They weren't seen as equal partners in any culture. And so they had nowhere to go. Anywhere they went, they were going to be assimilated into whatever culture that they entered into. So they were instructed, or the Hebrew people were instructed by God, take them into your culture, make them part of your culture, and they weren't really taken in as servants. That's not really how we see it played out in Scripture. We see in Scripture that, especially as far as the women were concerned, we see God tell them, take them as wives, and if you reject them as wives, set them free. They're not to be treated as slaves. That's actually one of the points that I made from Scripture is God says don't treat them as slaves. If you reject them as wives, give them their freedom. But we're also told they're not to be taken as wives right away. You're to give them time to mourn. So, yeah, it still doesn't really work with our sensibilities as Western culture because we don't understand the ancient world, and because we're a little soft and a little, just because we don't have the fortitude, quite frankly. And, you can be upset by that if you want. I don't really care. Be soft. I am too in a lot of instances, and I don't understand a lot of the things, but, be offended by it, whatever. You can be. I don't care. That's how it was. That's how things were back then. And a lot of the things we see in Scripture was God saying, this is how the world works. You can leave them out there to be taken in by someone else in the world who's going to not treat them right, or I can make provision for them and we can take them in and I can tell you how to treat them a better way. And that's the provision that we see in Scripture. Moving into the next one, yes, God does tell the Israelite people in another point in Scripture, you may take slaves from your neighboring countries. He does not say go and enslave your neighboring countries. He says you may buy slaves from them, which suggests that he realizes they're going to sell slaves from among their people. And we've seen that throughout history. I went through that, and I'm not going to go dig deep into all that. But he realizes that people groups are going to sell off the members of their people groups. And if you read into who God is and you look at all of the evidence that we have through Scripture, Old Testament, New Testament, and all of who God is in the book, then you see not only the just and judgment God, but you also see the merciful and provisional God that we have represented in the New Testament as well. And you see that he does make a way. And I believe that's what we see there when he says, you may buy slaves from your neighboring countries. But then you also see that he says, and this is how you're going to treat your slaves. And it was a very stark difference from how other cultures treated their slaves. And he built in rules for how to treat and how not to treat slaves, even bought from foreign cultures and brought into the Hebrew culture. And it was a very different way of treating slaves than other cultures did. And a much nicer way of treating slaves and servants, and whatever word you want to label it with, because there are a lot of different words that translate into slave or servant or whatever from the other ancient languages that the Bible was written in. And then lastly, we see how slavery was done within the Hebrew nation, and that was very different as well, because God said you are not to sell your brethren into slavery outside of your of the nation. So Hebrews were not to sell their own outside of their own. They weren't to say, oh, well, there's other cultures over here, let's sell our brothers outside of ourselves. That was absolutely prohibited. It was forbidden. And when someone fell into debt and couldn't pay it, then they were able to pledge themselves to another inside the people group and say, I can't pay my debt. Let me sell myself to you as a servant, work for you, and pay my debt through my work. And that's exactly what happened. And then they came to work for them for a period of 6 years. And then in the 7th year, they were to be set free. And not only set free, but then given provision and taken care of. And only if they then chose to make themselves a lifelong servant of the person that they were a servant of, only if they chose and if the person accepted them, then would they become a lifelong servant of that person. So it was a very different situation, even than other forms of servitude within the nation group. So, this is what we have gone through and seen and talked about in the weeks prior, just as a little recap. And still, people are going to be like, well, it's still wrong, and it's still because you're not listening, and you're not taking time to do any research of your own, or to get out of the narrow-minded idea of slavery that we have in the Western world, in the American mindset particularly, because we have been taught that slavery is this little thing that happened in our past, and we have no idea that there's a much larger picture idea of slavery. And to that end, I am going to challenge you right now. Those of you who will reach out, or just, I'm going to challenge you if someone will respond. There is a form of slavery that is alive and actually very prevalent today that you not only know about, but you agree with and support wholeheartedly. Reach out. Let me know that you're interested. Let me know that you want to hear about it. And I will point out, I will tell you all about it. I will absolutely enlighten you as to a form of slavery that you absolutely support and believe in that exists in Western culture today. And you will back it. You will absolutely stand firm and say, you know what, I hadn't thought about it that way, but you're right, it exists, and I support it. Or you'll be like, that's not what that is, but you still will support the fact that it exists, even if you deny that it is what I call it, what I'm saying it is. But by definition, I'll show you that it is exactly slavery. And you're still going to support it, even if you deny what it is. So that's it for this video. I will talk to you next week, probably about something else, but again, reach out if you're curious about what I'm talking about. I'll see you in the next video.